Hello, everybody. I'm Cathie Mahon. I'm the president and CEO of Inclusiv, and I have the great honor and delight to have an opportunity to have a conversation this morning with Jodie Harris. Jodie Harris has been the director of the CDFI Fund since 2019. She's been a longtime ally and friend of Inclusiv and of community development credit unions. And Jodie's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on at the fund and some of the opportunities for credit unions. Good morning, Jodie.
Good morning, Cathie. Great to be here with you.
Great to see you. Before we dive into questions, I thought I'd give you a minute or two if there's anything in particular you wanted to share about what's going on at the fund.
Sure, and thanks again for allowing us to do this chat virtually. We at the government are still figuring out our policies and procedures for engaging outside of our homes because we're all 100% remote. And so as many of your attendees figuring out the last 2 years and going into this next year under the pandemic has been a challenge, but the CDFI Fund has remained busy and continues to keep working at all of the things that are on our plate. We have, of course, our number of rounds that are in some sort of progress. The one that's probably of most interest is the CDFI program and NACA program round, which opened, and we have applications available. They are due April 12th, so folks should mark their calendars for that. And we are also working on a number of programs to open this spring, including the bond guarantee program will be coming up shortly. And then we have the Capital Magnet Fund, and BEA will be later in the year, as well as New Markets and SDLP, Small Dollar Loan Program, as well as the Economic Mobility Corp. So we're still moving along with our regularly scheduled programs, but I know that you and I wanted to talk a little bit about the big program that's coming up, the $1.75 billion. So I'll stop there and we can get into that conversation.
Great. So yes, let's talk about the minority lending program, which is, I know, top of mind for so many CDFI and minority designated credit unions. Tell us what we can expect, both in terms of the timeline, the structure, but also kind of where you think the funds are going to do the most good to support the work of CDFIs that are deeply immersed in and led by communities of color.
Sure. So we're excited about this. This is $1.75 billion from the $3 billion that was appropriated to the CDFI Fund back at the tail end of 2020 in response to the economic impact of the pandemic disproportionately in communities of color and low-income communities and communities that were already struggling before the pandemic hit. So this tranche of funding is dedicated toward institutions, certified CDFIs and CDFI MDIs that are serving minority communities. We're excited to design the program in a way that will allow the $1.75 billion to be used for a number of purposes, from financial services to financial products. There'll be the ability to build up some internal resources. While we're not particularly calling it technical assistance, we will have the ability for CDFI awardees to use some of that for organizational capacity. So we're working around the statute in order to make sure that we develop a program that mirrors the intent of the statute and directs the resources to the minority communities that have been most adversely impacted. What you can expect from us in terms of communication is that we are buttoning up the final application as well as the notice of funding availability. There's a lot of engagement from senior Treasury leadership, which is exciting, and it fits into the administration's overall priorities around community development and racial equity. So there'll be a lot more conversation with the administration, and our deputy secretary is very involved. So we have a lot of people working on this, getting ready. We will unveil the structure through the application. It won't be as straightforward as the Rapid Response Program, which many credit unions took advantage of last year, but it won't be as intense as some may think the Financial Assistance Program is. So it'll be a hybrid between the two. It'll ask about business strategy and organizational capacity, as well as who the CDFIs are serving and the communities that are impacted. So not only are we excited to launch the program, we're also excited to see the results and to see what applicants are saying that they're doing, who they're targeting, as well as being able to collect additional data on minority communities that are being served. So we'll have more information in the next couple of months. We're going to do a lot of communications leading up to the unveiling of the application so people can be prepared and understand the way that it's structured and what we'll be asking. And so just stay tuned, because we're going to have the $1.75 billion available shortly, and we'll be wrapping up that part of the recovery funding and keeping our fingers crossed for any new funding that comes our way.
That's really exciting. And I know, as you well know, Inclusiv has already sort of submitted a comment letter to you all about the minority lending program and our real interest and hope that, as you're designing the program, there's a real recognition that for, at least within the credit union sector, there have been, minority designated credit unions, dating back from the 1930s, 1940s, all the way through, through till, the 2000s. But so often the institutions have been themselves, not only are their communities kind of historically excluded from the capital flows, but they themselves as institutions have not had the ability to grow their assets, to be able to get resources from outside of their communities. So they've been sort of slow growing. They're not necessarily accustomed to, having grant writers on staff. Will that be an obstacle, or is this something that you really hope and anticipate that some of the smaller MDIs will be able to access and be competitive in?
That's a great question, Cathie. It's not our intention to design any program, let alone this $1.75 billion, to require, grant writers or to make it too difficult for CDFIs of all sizes to participate. And so in looking at the questions that we're asking, it really is going to be an opportunity for CDFIs to tell us about how they are serving COVID impacted communities, how they're serving low income and minority communities. And I think all CDFIs, regardless of size, are able to tell that story. And often those stories are best told in their own words. And so we'll be looking really at impact, and impact along a broad scale. So small CDFIs that have an impact very specific to their community will be able to tell that story. And there'll be opportunities for large national CDFIs to tell that story as well. But we're really looking at a CDFI's ability to say, here's what's happened in our area, here's how we've served these COVID impacted low income minority communities, and here's what we plan to do with the funding. That's a key portion of this, is that we are asking applicants to tell us, what are you going to do with the funding to continue your impact?
That's terrific. So I love, I think you emphasized the important thing is to tell your story and to tell it, for the credit unions to be able to tell it in their own words. I wonder if you could give some of your thoughts from where you sit, Jodie. How would you describe some of the most important contributions to the CDFI field that you've seen from credit unions and the role kind of that they play around financial inclusion? What are some of the most important contributions you've seen from credit unions in that space?
Sure. So over the years, and I've been director for 3 years, but I was with the CDFI Fund for a number of years prior to taking the role. And so I've witnessed the growth and impact of CDFI credit unions for a very long time. And in the last few years, I can say that that growth has significantly increased, and the impact of the CDFI credit unions have as well. Just to throw out a few numbers, CDFI credit unions represent about 1/3 of our total certified CDFI network. And in our last annual certification report, CDFI credit unions reported 60% of the total CDFI assets. So that is a significant percentage of the assets that are being deployed into the community. I think in terms of the impact, where we see the greatest level of activity is, of course, the bread and butter of credit unions, which is consumer finance. It's providing the financial products and services to individual members, which in turn get re-leveraged and deployed in the greater community, making that impact. But the focus on consumer finance and residential finance, I think, is the greatest impact that we've seen in just looking at the numbers. And of course, there has been a significant rise in CDFI credit unions that are applying for, in particular, our Financial Assistance Award Program. So we see a significant number of CDFIs using the power of leverage to take our funding and turn that into financial products and services for their communities. I think from fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2021, we saw a 10 percentage point increase in the number of applicants. And then we've seen in raw numbers a doubling of credit union applicants to our financial assistance program. So I think it's great that CDFIs are learning how to use our resources to really target those types of products that I think are hardest to finance in some cases. Consumer finance is a thorny area for financial institutions to crack, and CDFI credit unions are doing a really tremendous job in providing those types of financial services and products.
That is so, it's so great to hear and to have the fund see the value of that. And I think, you know, as credit unions are going through the paces, whether it's for financial assistance or minority lending programs, being able to tell that story about just how consumer loans, a loan to an individual who may not be able to get a good, safe, responsible loan elsewhere, how transformative that really can be. And so I assume, but I should ask, you know, as credit unions are telling their story, clearly we want to be able to tell our story with data, but I wonder if how important it might be to try to, for the credit unions to be able to also tell some stories of how they've seen a loan to a low-income individual or a household, how that has been transformative in the lives of that individual or family. Do you find that those kinds of stories important in helping to tell their story?
Oh, absolutely. I think the one thing about credit unions, the cooperative model that underlies the way credit unions operate, is also an important part of the story. And so credit unions are formed to address specific needs of their membership. And when the members are in areas where they lack access to that traditional financial capital, or they lack, like you said, appropriate, safe, affordable products and services, that story becomes even more important. So the ability to say that our membership base consists of this group of people who haven't had access before, but now do because of what we're doing, and how this cooperative model allows us to really listen to our membership and understand the specific needs, I think that's a great part of the story. Consumer finance over the years has become more and more important, particularly as we move into a digital age where all types of products are available at the fingertips, and not everyone has access to technology. Not everyone has access or understands some of these new products that are coming about. But credit unions play an important role, not just with consumer finance, but the education and support part that comes along with providing these types of loans and services to their members. So there's an ecosystem there that's built within, I think, the credit union network that really focuses on the membership and the needs of the membership, which is a great story to tell.
That is terrific. I think, I think you mentioned it earlier on, the extent to which, you know, there's the consumer lending and the consumer finance, and so often with credit unions, there comes a whole lot of support services around that. You know, I mean, even just helping people get through the paces of sorting through all the different things going on in their financial lives as they're applying for a loan and thinking about really the best way that they can use that loan to sort of advance, not just for the immediate need that's presented, but also to kind of advance their overall financial lives. But you also mentioned about how important it is and what you've seen in the data about the increase around the residential lending. And I certainly think that there's a lot in that, even if, even for those credit unions that maybe aren't making the mortgage loans, if they know they've been doing some credit building work for folks or helping people repair their credit to get them sort of homeowner ready, I think there's a lot to be said in just sort of the consumer finance being part of that pipeline to getting people towards being able to really build assets, whether it's through home ownership or through small business lending. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
So I definitely think with all CDFIs, and particularly with credit unions, there is that support piece that makes credit unions stand out from other types of financial institutions. I mean, that's part of our certification. You have to provide development services that correspond with the loans and product services that you offer. And, I bet every member of a CDFI credit union can name one person on staff who has helped them, who has answered a question, who has walked them through the process, who has sat down and worked with them to figure out the best products and services, understand that loan. And that's key to the bread and butter of CDFIs and of the credit union model. So I think being able to continue to offer that service and offer that ability to touch all of the members in ways, one, education, supportive classes. If it's small business lending, you have small business classes that go along with that. Being able to provide a range of products and services to help individuals and the members achieve what they're looking to do financially is really important. And our FA and TA products allow CDFIs to use our funds to develop that. A lot of what they call business development or pre-development, that's the cost side of the model, right? And you need federal assistance and other types of flexible capital to be able to do that. So I really am excited about our programs that allow that flexibility in funding and allow credit unions to use a portion of our funding to continue to do the part where it may not bring in the revenue, but it's actually probably one of the most important parts of the work that credit unions do. So again, the increase in credit unions accessing our funds is showing how they're able to leverage our funds to do a variety of work.
That's great. I'm so glad you raised that point. And that's an important thing that for our participants here today to really take home is the CDFI fund resources can become the opportunity to support some of those activities that are so critical, but don't show up in the in the P&L statement so much. They end up, or they look like just a strict cost center. This is the place where you can say it's important that we're investing in financial coaching. It's important that we're investing extra time and energy to help our members, walk them through new technology, walk them through kind of the next stage of opportunities to be able to access new products at the credit union. And that takes time and resources and staffing. And this becomes an opportunity for the credit unions to look at supporting some of those development services that are so critical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I guess my final question is, I think we've seen, as you pointed out at the beginning, there's been a real big increase in credit unions that are certified as CDFIs and are accessing fund programs. And I know that doesn't happen by accident. I know we at Inclusiv have been working hard with so many of our partners in the credit union industry to make sure credit unions are supported as they go through the paces to apply for CDFI certification or apply or get them ready to be applying to CDFI fund programs. But there's also folks on the other side at the CDFI fund staff or in the reviewer pool that no doubt are doing a lot of work to make sure they're also recognizing the value of the credit union model for the CDFI fund. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that's been shifting over time, and in terms of, you know, the awareness of the staff and the reviewers about the credit union model, and if there's anything further we could do to help build, to continue to build that awareness.
Sure. And this actually predates me as director, but I recall a lot of this when I was working in the policy shop of Treasury, as well as on staff at the CDFI fund. In probably the maybe 2015 or 16, we heard a lot from you all, credit unions, as well as the banking sector about our financial assistance application and how it was perceived that there was a bias toward nonprofit institutions, toward groups that had grant writer experience. And we took a deep dive into that application and went through the questions. We did a lot of outreach to determine, is there a bias in the way that we ask our questions, and how do we create a level playing field for CDFIs of all types, specifically those that were depositories where some of the questions didn't really translate well into, or at least how to answer them in terms of the business model. And so undergoing that exercise to make sure that our application had no bias toward any institution also made us look internally at our expertise and our folks on staff. And we have made a concerted effort over the years to bring in a very diverse staff. We have folks that have touched every piece of the financial sector, including credit unions, to make sure that we have that well-rounded perspective when looking at new programs, when looking at our existing programs. And so one of the things I would say there is, you know, the CDFI fund team is great, and we're always looking for ways to improve what we do. We're always looking for ways to hear from the industry about things that we might be missing or areas that might need our attention. And so the partnership that I think we've had with you at Cathie and Inclusiv, where you all send us a lot of information on what credit unions are doing or places where you think we may need to take a look, has been really helpful. And we're also developing partnerships with the regulators to understand how they look at credit unions and for the banks in terms of depositories, to make sure that we're not asking for information that conflicts in information that they need, or making sure they understand what we're collecting and see how we can kind of share data and communicate better and make sure that we're all have the same understanding of the work that CDFI credit unions do. And this has become more important over the years, as you're noting, with the increase in the percentage of credit unions and depositories in general. And so just making sure that we take as best an unbiased approach as we can in developing our programs and looking at our existing ones. So I encourage Inclusiv to continue to reach out and send us information and, you know, tap us on the shoulder when we say, you know, this doesn't really fit the credit union model. Let's talk about ways that we can improve this. So that's been very beneficial and helpful to us. But again, we're always trying to make sure that our programs are open to all types of CDFIs. And if there's areas where the credit unions are finding particularly challenging or difficult, love to have the conversation so we can learn more about those challenges, as well as figure out ways to make sure that everyone has access to our funding.
That's great. And for the audience today, I'll just say, you know, that just a reminder, when we ask you to tell stories and send us photos and tell us what's going on, please respond to those, because it's going into the types of communications that Jodie was talking about, and it really does make a difference. And there is a lot of ability for us to tell the global story of the movement, so that when you have to go through your applications, there's a better understanding from the reviewers of exactly what you're doing. So thank you, Jodie, for reading all of that material that we put out there and that we send to you. It's really, really appreciated. With that, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. I wanna thank you, Jodie, so much for joining us today, and for sharing your thoughts, the background on the program, and just sort of hearing a bit about what's coming up. Before we close, I know you cannot predict what the government protocols are going to be around travel in the coming months, but I do want to just remind you that we would be we're very pleased to invite you to join us, and we hope that you will be cleared at some point in the future for travel to join us for our annual conference, May 2nd through the 4th in San Juan.
Well, it's on the calendar, Cathie. So we have it there, and as soon as we know, we will start making arrangements, but it's on the calendar.
That's fabulous. Well, thank you again. And yeah, I really want to just see if you have any parting thoughts before we conclude.
I'll just end by reminding everyone to sign up for the CDFI Fund Gov Delivery Service, which gives real-time information on our programs, on deadlines, on application materials. We have a host of conference calls and webinars, from certification to other programs, where people can join and sign up and learn more about our programming. And this conversation was great, Cathie. I love chatting with you about what we're doing, but I didn't go into my normal, here's a rundown of all the programs and everything that's happening. So you can find that at cdfifund.gov, as well as sign up for the services. And if you have questions, our staff is happy to answer those. So just circle back to the website for more information, and hopefully I will see you all in May.
Terrific. Thank you, Jodie.
Great. Thank you, Cathie.